and welcome to what is sure to be an exciting episode of the IOTSA Cybersecurity Experts Panel, an informative, interactive channel discussion covering the latest trends in data protection. I'm your host, Brian Sherman, and today we'll discuss if businesses and MSPs are truly poised for failure in cybersecurity. Those sharing their insight and advice on that channel perspective include Justin Kallhoff, CEO of Infogressive, Rob Ray, Vice President of Business Development for Datto, and Dan Wensley, President of Passportal. Good afternoon, gentlemen. First off, I'd like to thank you for joining us on the IOTSA Cybersecurity Experts Panel. And if my estimation is correct, the three of you are bringing a combined 40, 50, possibly even 60 years of security and managed services experience to the conversation today. So the channel force is certainly with us today. So let's get right to it. Forrester research recently reported that nearly 40% of all data breaches are caused by insiders. And of those insider breaches, 26% are caused by abuse or malicious intent by insiders. And 56% are caused by inadvertent misuse or sheer accidents by employees. So Justin, let's put you in the hot seat to start off with, and then we'll go to Rob and Dan, get them involved afterwards. But which end user bad practices should concern businesses the most?
Slam dunk. Clicking on links that they're not supposed to in emails, or visiting websites they probably shouldn't be on at work. Just having good technology at the perimeter, and then, you're not going to stop people from clicking links. So there's a combination of apply some technology to help them when they accidentally click on things, I suppose. And then we like to also combine that with security awareness training, which can bring it down, but is probably never going to get it down to zero of clicking on things and going to places they're not supposed to.
Right. Rob, thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, it's end user mistakes. It's called the internet, unfortunately. If there's anything out there, they're going to find you if they want to get your information. I actually draw the analogy that it's like your home. You can buy all the security systems in the world, and if somebody wants in, they're going to get in. The key, I think, is just have enough security that they just move on to something else, make it a little more difficult for them. But ultimately, it's education, it is technology, it is an investment, it's ultimately outsourcing it to an expert.
And as you mentioned, eventually there is no perfect solution because people will be people in the end. So Dan, how should MSPs be addressing and breaking these types of habits?
Well, it's interesting. I heard a great quote at an event I was at here in Detroit today, and one is, I don't sell brains and I can't fix stupid. And I mean, that's being pretty harsh when 56% of all these breaches are happening by mistake. It is, let's say, a mistake. I think that's both a threat and the opportunity for us. I mean, in my lane around password security, we had a great tagline. I think we maybe jettisoned a little early, which was the end of sticky note security. So I think there are some very basic practices. I think Justin and Rob are dead on. It starts with training and communication. And we have to mitigate, just common errors that are being done. And if, it's funny, I think if you ask them after they made the mistake, if they'd been trained, maybe they wouldn't have. So I think we've got to get out ahead of it and be talking about it.
That's an excellent point. I know I was in a discussion yesterday with a number of MSPs. We're talking about one client that had a breach happen, and it was a mistake that he made but could not be avoided. But they had to talk him down because it was so tragic for him, the amount of damage he felt he did to the company, even though it's something anybody would have done. We don't always think about that aspect too, is what it does to an employee when they do something that's untoward, and even when it's not their fault. So the ramifications can be pretty significant. Justin or Rob, any thoughts on that part?
Yeah, I think limiting the exposure and damage once it happens, because the saying is, it's not a matter of if, a matter of when. So when it does happen, the question is, what do you have in place to limit the actual areas that the bad guy can go, and to how long are they going to be there? Average dwell time for an attacker is like 7 months or something like that today. So, find them faster, limit the damage when it does happen is also something I think people should be more aware of, particularly MSPs for sure.
So slowing down the dwell time was one of the conversations this week too. I heard quite frequently in the security discussions is trying to slow it, and is that where the layered security really helps as well? As hopefully you can catch these issues that are taking place and spot the problems and vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I mean, most malware today takes less than a minute to do its thing, right? So what are the chances you're going to find it in a minute? Even an awesome MSSP that does it all day, every day, is going to have a hard time finding an attacker in a minute. So, it's limiting what they can get to and having proper layers of defense even inside of a network. It's not just about a firewall on the edge. Must have protection and visibility inside of a network once the bad guy's on a workstation.
And Rob, I know with backup, it comes in crucial here too, because obviously every mistake can't be avoided. What about thoughts on that side the MSPs can do to alleviate the damage that happens when a breach occurs or other vulnerability?
Yeah, for us, it's obviously been a significant area of growth because ultimately your backup's your last line of defense, and it's been considered and now is regularly talked about as part of the security stack. You have to have all the frontline defenses, but you also have to be able to recover when you can. So it's definitely accelerated our growth. It's definitely the MSPs have been leveraging that as part of the most important, or one of the most important components within their security solution. There's no doubt about that. And then the other aspect of this, and as we're talking about, and Justin mentioned ransomware. It's not even so much about the ransomware itself. It's not even so much about the breach. It's the amount of time that these things take you down. Like that's critical to your business, and you're going to lose more money just trying to solve this problem than the ransomware attack itself or the hack is actually worth. So it's about operational efficiency. It's about keeping your business up and going during these down times. That's where we've seen a lot of significant wins for MSPs.
Very good point. And I know the insurance part of it comes into it as well, and understanding not just from an MSP perspective what insurance they need to have on the cyber side, but also looking at the insurance for their clients. It's not always straightforward because those processes have to be put in place, and MSPs I know a lot of times can help them make sure that they've put all the proper steps in place, dotted the I's, crossed the T's. And I think, Justin, you may have even alluded to at one of the last conferences, is even then you don't have assurances they're going to pay out.
Yeah, you don't want to get me started on the whole cyber insurance thing. That would take a whole hour. Certainly something to be done probably over a beer or something. But just a message to all MSPs, ask lots of questions around your cybersecurity insurance policies about what they pay out for, and give them real scenarios of, if this happens, will my business, my MSP, be covered under this circumstance? And get that in writing. Be aware that many providers aren't actually going to pay out in a breach scenario if essentially the underwriting process leaves a lot of room for good lawyers at insurance companies to wiggle out of paying breaches if you didn't answer something exactly accurate, or ignorance is not bliss. It's kind of like taxes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's a 7-figure suit going on right now, which was the atypical story we always talk about. CTO at an MSP did a bad thing. End user sues MSP. They win, and now the MSP is having to sue their insurer to get the coverage. I mean, this is going to put two different businesses out of business for exactly the points that Justin talked about. And I think Justin made another great point about duration of an attack. I mean, ransomware is one thing. It's a line in the sand and held for ransom until you pay. And a lot of the hacks we're talking about they're in there collecting data for an exposed period of time. We're all seeing even what Facebook has gone through here recently, just with data breach and information sharing. So on the front end of that story, where both Justin and Rob can talk about recovering back and the time it takes to get back there, access to all of this stuff, I think, is the critical point. That's what we see every day at Passportal. It's who got into the network, when, what are they using, and there's some pretty big flags that can go up there when you've got too many access points at an admin level when you have one admin. So there are some early indicators that I think more MSPs can do both internally and externally to gain some more insights and protect themselves and their customers.
So the process is obviously an ongoing one, is putting the right tools in place, literally preaching the proper procedures for end users and continuing to reinforce those habits, and then making sure they have protections in place in case something happens. And that's a lot of times those three components are hard to balance for many MSPs. And I know that, SMB is a strength for the channel still. Primarily most of what the mid-range channel does, some are supporting the enterprise and mid-level, but they're still looking at MSPs for education and process improvement support. And neither has been a traditional channel role, though they're critical services that their customers need today. So how can MSPs acquire and deliver these type of capabilities? Is it more of a partnership role building? What are you seeing happening in the channel right now?
Who are you asking? You want me to start?
You can start, Rob. Sorry.
Rob went still, so I'm going to jump on this grenade.
So, when we look at this, and we predominantly focus on the sorry, my internet connection at my resort here. I think that what we're seeing is that first of all, we're customized more towards a small, medium business size solution. So what you're looking at when you look at MSP is in essence delivering 80-90% of these services for a long time. They just haven't really packaged it up in a security kind of way. So this is where I think the biggest opportunity for the MSP servicing that SMB market is to really start focusing on how they position themselves and what it is that they've already been doing, and then taking that kind of next step with it. And making sure that they have the right solutions in there, and in essence helping the SMB, ultimate SMB end users sleeping better at night. But that's where I think the biggest opportunity, the biggest gap, at least in that space, is as far as enterprise go. Those guys have got the money; they can deal with it. Dan mentioned Facebook. Facebook will recover from this. Equifax recovered from it. Uber recovered from it. Sony recovered from it. It's the SMB that is so absolutely critical, and that's why we see it as the biggest opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. It must be nice to have bad internet when you're at a great resort there, Rob. That's awesome. I think what I've seen, especially when it comes to security, and quite honestly, and Rob may agree with me, we saw this early on in the evolution of managed services. The IT services industry gets a hold of it, gets educated, and I think almost too proactively goes running out to their customer with the new latest and greatest thing. Imagine being an SMB, worried about this, possibly, but your trusted advisor runs in the next day and says, "Oh, I've got a great service. This is what we need to do now," without sort of the courting process. I think this is the opportunity for the MSPs, if they're not already, staying in consistent communication with their clients and bringing them to a point where, get a yes about their concern with security before you try to sell them something. And you can bring them along. I think that we might be rushing into it a little too heavily, and the poor SMB is feeling bloated. I heard it at a conference this week. It's too many tools, too many solutions. And I'm hearing that both from the MSP community and the MSP sharing that back to us about what they're hearing from the SMB.
Justin, any thoughts on that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, MSPs are already struggle just to keep up with their own jobs. If you add security operational overhead, which tends to be obnoxiously loud, very high in volume, difficult to discern what's actionable, what's not. Clearly I'm biased that I think MSPs should partner for security, but think long and hard about bringing on something that is going to create that much more overhead. And then it's an endless loop. We probably work with an MSP once or twice a week, a different one that is in the middle of a security incident, and their business will be brought to a standstill for a month, sometimes two, just trying to figure out what the hell to do between insurance and breaches and IR and explaining to customers what the hell happened. I just think that unless you really are passionate about security, the best thing for you to do is to outsource or acquire to avoid that. It's a different business model and it's operationally heavy.
Makes sense. I know it's very, you have to be very focused when you're working with security, and the business owners expect 100% when they're looking at their tech support. They want to make sure that they're up and running. There can't be failures. I mean, we always know with the cloud and other things, it's 99% success rate. But with security, they expect 100% if they're investing and they're spending money. And I've seen providers that do this. They're offering not maybe written guarantees, but say we'll make sure that you're up and running all the time. We know that's a slippery slope. All MSPs really should never provide those type of assurances, especially with security, because nothing is foolproof when you're the target. So how do experienced cybersecurity professionals set the proper expectations and address those no guarantee objections that they get from their clients?
I could speak for, at least from Infogressive's perspective. I think the last time I looked, which was pretty recent, there's like 400 vulnerabilities released a month. There's over 1 million new pieces or new hashes of malware released per day right now. Just that sheer volume combined with the bad guys only have to be right one time with any of those things to win. The good guys, us, the MSP, have to be right every time. It's just that alone puts the game, it's very asymmetric, very much in favor of the attacker. And so we as the good guys are defense people. We had better work well together. We had better communicate just to have a chance. And we're still going to lose. And that's where I say you better be ready to limit the damage and find the bad guy as quickly as possible to bring the balance of power back anywhere towards the middle.
Rob, I'd imagine that plays into your hand too with backup and all of the services like what Datto provides.
Yeah, absolutely, very much so, and that's again why we've kind of moved from the storage conversations into the security conversations, because Justin's absolutely right. There's really nothing, like anybody that's guaranteeing security is not telling you the truth. Like there's just no way for anybody to do that, and it's a very, very slippery slope, as you mentioned. So it's more of, okay, so something bad has happened. What are we going to do, and how are we going to recover from this? What's the job that I'm going to perform as the MSP to help either get you back online or minimize the damage? And I think as long as you are, and from an SMB perspective, as long as you're making that investment, you're actually trying, as opposed to, well, it's just going to happen, so why invest in anything? That's, I think, where the MSP needs to really insert their knowledge, that their expertise, without saying that this isn't going to happen, but we're going to minimize the damage when it does.
Yeah, Rob, I'd agree. I think even if we look at security from perimeter security in our own homes, we buy the best now IoT tools to have video of our premises. Nobody is guaranteeing that there isn't going to be somebody on that video breaking into my house while I'm sitting here at a Datto roadshow in Detroit. But I have the sense of security that I've done something. So I couldn't agree with Rob more. We have to put up the fence. We have to lock the front door. We have to have that video to know if somebody's come in and identify the problem. And it's about knowledge. Nobody's ever guaranteed that somebody's not going to break into my house or steal my car. These are the precautions and the necessary precautions to make it a little harder. And thanks to video now, get the guy on film and hopefully get him filmed. There's how old I am. Get him in the cloud, recorded, and identify the guy. So I think we always seem to go to the extreme. And even when I talk password security with an MSP, who quite honestly is archaic in the way they're storing credentials and data, and unfortunately too many cases for their clients now. And I talk about, well, we can secure it, we can encrypt it, we can access control it, and they're saying, well, what about this and what about that, and taking it to another extreme. well, what's the alternative? You're going to leave it where it is, completely vulnerable, at high risk for your own MSP and your client, or we're going to take all of these precautionary steps to make it more convenient and more secure for both you and your customers. So I think we always look to the nth degree rather than say, hey, let's take these steps to make some things happen proactively.
When you come across a bear with your buddy, you don't have to outrun the bear. You have to outrun your buddy.
That's why I like hanging out with you so much.
Ultimately, just be better and faster than the next guy, and let the next guy be the victim.
Yeah, I mean, all of these layers of defense by themselves are defeatable. You're not going to get to 100%. It's about making it harder, or having so many layers that one of them, the bad guy, doesn't think about being there. It's that one that catches them that you hope is the last line of defense or sooner, right?
That was the one discussion, the roundtable we had with 5 MSPs yesterday, is they said that probably the biggest objection that they're running into is those that are looking at the sheer cost of, well, there's no ROI in security for them. And that's why they're looking to work even more with the clients that have a compliance concern, and they're digging deeper to find out, okay, I might not be able to provide an ROI, but here's why they really need to make security matter. And that's an education process that can be difficult, especially when they're counting pennies and dollars on their IT budgets. There's still quite a few of those out there. That's going to be the challenge, I think, for the channel.
Yeah, I mean, they buy, it's like Rob said last time we were together, they buy insurance for their business, and that might not happen, but they buy it. Why do they buy it? Because there's real risk there, and a probability equation of, you buy insurance on your house against a fire. Might not ever happen, but you still do it. And the chances of your business getting breached, pretty damn good right now these days.
A lot more than a fire, that's for sure.
And I don't think it's not always doom and gloom. I mean, it's not only worst case scenario where Datto, Infogressive, Passportal actually add value. We're adding operational efficiency. We're adding real services that I think are often overlooked as well, that are tangible to the MSP and tangible to the end user. This isn't always a doomsday scenario, and you're not going to see an ROI until the worst of the worst happens. There's real value in operational efficiency and all of this stuff, again, for both parties.
Even for the MSPs, though, I think it's great to have the security discussion allows them to be talking more engaged with end users, whereas many in the past have dealt with the IT team, where there's an IT team or the owners of the group. They're digging deeper with security. So even if they're not providing all the services, to Justin's point, at least they can start having the conversations, understanding where there may be some issues and opportunities within the business outside of even security. So it's still an important conversation to have, and it opens up a new world for MSPs that are really focusing in that area. So let's shift to emerging technologies. IoT, AI. At the CompTIA meeting this week, we were talking a lot about what's next for technology. AR is another one, but they're making their way into the SMB community, not just the enterprise and the larger companies. But those innovations also elevate the security risks for businesses and provide additional consulting and support opportunities for MSPs. They're differentiating options, much like security is today. So how can providers leverage those advances to increase their sales and strengthen their relationships with the clients? Who'd like to go first on this one?
Sure. I'm certainly no expert in any of those advanced technologies, but I think one of the things that has been consistent in our industry and across the channel is we're always going through hype cycles and growth cycles. And again, I would caution the audience and the MSPs from let's not run head on into any of these emerging technologies if they don't make sense in the vertical that you work in or pertain to your business today. I think your job today is to stay educated, insightful. The keynote speaker at the event with CompTIA, he was looking out 30 years from now and 50 years, which educationally is great for us. It's up to, I think, every individual MSP to understand how they're going to leverage it. The value we're bringing to them as a technology expert from going to these things as an MSP is to have the foresight to help them should they be looking at some of these solutions.
I think just to put onto Dan's comment there, we are seeing significant growth in the MSP space, more so than ever before, and faster than we've ever seen before. And I think the IoT conversation kind of fits nicely into security conversation, which fits nicely into the cloud conversation, because everything around us is becoming more technical as a result of IoT. Everything is becoming less secure. Everything's becoming more complicated. We use these products, we use these tools, we use these services to make our lives easier, but the infrastructure and the maintenance and the security and the protection behind it is a lot more complicated. And this is why we're seeing the massive opportunity in the MSP space, because that complication. And the opportunity, the largest opportunity, is going to be in the SMB space, because the typical manufacturing company is not going to want to invest any time in learning about cloud security and the Internet of Things and what's producing data, where's the data going, is it compliant, is it secure. So this is where it's all about taking that complexity and really dumbing it down. But it's also, and probably the biggest opportunity for the MSP is you have to stay ahead. You have to learn as much as, exactly what Dan said. What's going to happen 40, 50 years from now is not relevant. It's not even going to be important to any of us. We'll be long gone before we even have to think about that. And that's futures. Those things never really come to fruition anyway. However, by you being at least knowledgeable about it, and what does that mean today, and where is that going to go, and what do I need to keep my eye on for you, small, medium business manufacturer, that's where the opportunity for the channel is that you keep talking about and staying on top of and learning about the IoT and what it all means. And, there's lots of opportunities for the channel to get that.
So leading edge as opposed to the bleeding edge, that's the one thing we always talk about with the channel, is the innovations that really matter to their customers today.
There's no margin in bleeding edge. There just isn't. And we've seen this. We've seen this with, dare I say it, the cloud solution providers, guys that jumped in 100% cloud. I probably have met 2 dozen, 3 dozen of them over the course of my career. Only a handful are making any money. When you jump right into the bleeding edge part of all this, it's usually the next guy that's going to make money at it once it's an established thing. The first guy in rarely isn't around anymore. Look at MySpace versus Facebook, it's just the way it is.
Makes perfect sense. They're always looking for a little guidance too. Talk about the mystery aspect of it, but it's the complexity and guidance that they need, somebody to keep them on the rails, as opposed to taking them in a new direction. Nonetheless,
but don't make it complex. You have to. It's all about simplifying it. Sure. These guys when I say these guys, these small business owners, they don't want complexity. They just want reassurance, and that's why you have to take the complexity out of it and just really, really use the term dumb it down. Just dumb it right down and just say, here's what we're going to do. Here's how it works. Let me know if you have any questions. But this is what you're paying for.
Very good, Justin.
I think that's exactly it, Rob. Of those small business owners, they just want reassurance that you're ahead of the curve, right? And my suggestion to MSPs, don't look at security as like this pain in the butt thing you just have to deal with because you're forced to. I mean, you could be using it as a competitive differentiator or a conversation starter. Almost every business owner on the planet is aware of hackers and the danger of some sort to their business. You could use that as leverage ultimately to gain more business. If you can have the security conversation and sound like you know how to stop hackers for the small business, you're going to win. It's going to create more business for you. Don't look at it as a pain. It's an opportunity. I see market opportunity.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about IoT, especially in this community, and there's some who scoff at it and say, well, what is it really? I mean, again, this week, talking to one individual at CompTIA who I sat with an MSP and we counted up all of the connected devices he has in his home, and he was north of 30. And that, back in the day, was a good size SMB customer. Hey, they have 30 devices. That's great. That was a target customer. Now they're not, business related, but that's where it's going. And that's the opportunity for the MSP to both be looking 5, 10, 15 years out and what may be coming, but also embracing what's going on now. MDM had its little flash in the pan. Is that going to become more relevant? But we're not talking about it right now as much as we were 4 years ago ahead of its market curve. it may be the item we should be talking about now because it's become even more prevalent.
Right. In the CompTIA emerging technologies community, IoT was the one of all of the different options that the community members looked at that they saw as the now opportunity for MSPs. So I thought that was interesting too. There's some other things that are on the realm, but what is the most profit potential business opportunity for them was IoT. So let's do kind of a rapid fire here quick. Is what are the most, I've heard several people say that the channel is really poised to fail in cybersecurity. And I know that's a shock statement they use to get pushback and say, why not? But what are the most common mistakes that MSPs make when they decide to jump into being, a cybersecurity expert, even if they're not publishing or promoting themselves as that, but they want to become more involved in security? Rob, do you want to start off?
I'm actually not really seeing any mistakes, but not from a technology or that perspective. I think, well, first of all, professing yourself to be an actual security expert is a dangerous, slippery slope. You look at what Justin and his organization are doing. Those are security experts. They have a CISO. They understand complexity. They understand compliance. So I think for the average SMB user, that's not as important as it would be more for a mid-market, larger enterprise. So don't position yourself that way. However, here are some very basic things, basic technologies. And I think if there's any mistakes that MSPs are making, it's just not taking advantage of that opportunity right now. And it's, again, not positioning yourself as a security expert, but definitely positioning yourself as a security knowledgeable level of security. And here's what I can do for your business, and here's how we're going to protect it. That opportunity is massive right now. And I don't think there's any downside to that. We're seeing nothing but growth in that particular space. You just don't want to get yourself into a position where liability comes into play. And, I'll turn that over to Justin because I'm sure he's got input on that.
I think the biggest mistakes that I see today are more on the business side than necessarily the technology side. It's underestimating the cost of competing for that talent and acquiring it. Great security talent isn't going to flock to an MSP where they're going to be like the guy in the fire. They want to work with other security practitioners, and then probably underestimating the overall cost of building a platform that actually can be meaningful about reducing risk. All of that security technology is expensive. Never mind the people, never mind the time. It's a large chunk to bite off. And it took me years, a lot of years, to even begin to get it right. And we're still learning rapidly. And then once you get it right, the bad guys can shift, and the crap that you did 2 years ago is practically meaningless. And so it evolves, in my experience, much faster than a lot of the MSP stuff. Route switch, phones, backups. That stuff does not change as rapidly as security defensive technology does. And it's, pain in the butt as the business owner to keep up with it.
Yeah, I think both Justin and Rob, I think are exactly on point with it. And all I would do is summarize it. We saw these exact same challenges with the MSP evolution. One of the things we always talked about was don't become an MSP overnight. Don't go off to your customer from a break fix and try to deliver a 5.9 SLA completely outsourced company. This is the exact same conversation we're having today. So I think I agree with both these guys. The technology is there. The solutions are there. The steps to become competent in these areas are there. Don't try to become it overnight, and don't, to Justin's point, don't expect that talent to be within your own organization, because it's probably not.
Excellent points from all. We're getting close on time here, so I'd like to just get some final thoughts or advice. If you have one piece of advice to offer MSPs today that are looking to get more involved in security, Rob, where would you start?
I think that's, we've had that, and we've kind of touched on the conversation a little bit here, which is talking about insurance. And, again, Justin mentioned it earlier, you get insurance Mr. Small Business End User, you get insurance for all aspects of your business, your employees, your, fire, all your different riders and stuff. Why wouldn't you get insurance around your security? And that's in essence what the MSP is. We've been talking about trying to get away from insurance type conversations, but data is important. Your reputation is important. More important, I would suggest, and not necessarily more important, but definitely higher risk than having a fire. So why are you paying X amount of dollars per month for fire insurance for something that's probably not going to happen, whereas your breach will? The damage to your reputation and whatnot will. And that's where I think that we can have better conversations with end users if we kind of position it from that perspective as opposed to the traditional way, which is don't sell it like it's insurance. I mean, this is insurance.
Very good. How about you, Justin?
I've got a personal pet peeve that I think all MSPs can learn from that I see every day. Stop choosing your anti-malware solution based on whether or not it integrates with your RMM tool. Just because it integrates does not mean that it's the best at preventing malware, and that's what you're paying them for, is to stop malware. So stop doing that. Find something better. Expect more out of anti-malware technology. It should actually stop malware.
Or in a better case, why don't you just go and get your malware protection to integrate with the tools you use? The channel's got a huge buying influence. Like if and there's a million different malware solutions that are out there and antivirus solutions that are out there. I do agree. Don't pick it based on what's integrated with your tool. Either find one that you love that works really well and force them to integrate with the tools you use, or find one that does, because there are equivalent ones out there.
Yeah, and my comment would be embrace it. We're starting to see some very early research coming out after we've been making this 10-year evolution to managed services, that there is now some downward pressure on profitability in the managed services space. So new innovation, new services are critically important. My biggest piece of advice is bite off a chunk and chew on it. Don't go into it, try to become an MSSP overnight. Don't make that mistake that some of us made back in the day going to managed services, but grab something tangible that makes sense for you, your business, in your market, in your vertical. Don't try to boil the ocean overnight. Take advantage of it and start the conversations with your clients. And that migration path will lay itself out in front of you as your service evolves, your technology delivery evolves, and your customers adopt.
So the one word that came out from this week's discussion, I think, was snackable. That fits in well with that, Dan, too, is start taking those snackable elements that you can use and building the cybersecurity practice. So with that, we could go on all day. I do appreciate definitely Justin Kallhoff, Rob Ray, and Dan Wensley for joining us for this edition of the IOTA Cybersecurity Experts Panel. Please join us for future sessions where we'll dig into different topics, but also, explore the opportunities for MSPs and MSSPs. With that, I want to thank you for your time and appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoy the vacation, Rob.
Thanks all.